Michael Bollier, Michael Sharon, Joseph Coletti, Kirsten Erlinson,
Looks like she's frozen. Oh, Kirsten, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm here. Kirsten, hand over.
Pam Farrington,
Pam Farrington, Marlboro.
Carrie Forlino, Drew Golphin,
Drew Golphin, Marlboro.
Gabriel Marks,
Steve Marks, Hebron.
Amy Romanchuk,
Amy Romanchuk, Marlboro.
Scott Soyette,
Scott Soyette, Andover.
Heather Summer,
Heather Summer, Hebron.
Oliver Siraj,
Officer Ram High School.
Brianna Adepaku,
Brianna Adepaku, Ram High School.
and Samantha Maxwell, Ram Middle School.
And Mike Bollier is here.
Yep.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So that will bring us to the public comment portion of the agenda. Hebron, Andover, and Marlboro community engagement and attendance at board public meetings is welcome. The public comment segment of the meeting agenda is set aside so the board may receive public comments. Procedurally, public remarks will be limited to 3 minutes and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. Because the board is limited by the Freedom of Information Act to discussing only matters on the agenda, the board is not permitted to engage in a discussion of the comments presented. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Any public comment? Okay. Do we have any items that we want to add or delete from the agenda? All righty, that will bring us to the student representative reports.
So February, even though it is the shortest month of the year, was jam-packed with activities for the Rand Middle School students. To start February off, the middle school band and chorus had their winter concert. The band and chorus students did a wonderful job performing. Their hard work and dedication certainly paid off. Later that week, 8th grade students got tours to the high school and were able to ask any questions we had about our transition to high school before picking our classes. That night, students had the chance to go to the middle school Hearts and Flowers dance for Valentine's Day. The following Friday, RAM students got to have a fun time before President's Day weekend at a pep rally. The Student Council organized games and activities for students to sign up for. The RAM Middle School concert band also turned into the pep band for a day, playing fun, recognizable tunes throughout the pep rally. Some of our clubs and extracurricular activities and groups had events during the month of February. The math club participated in a math competition, and the science school team participated in their competition. Also, the unified basketball season has started up. Finally, last Thursday, February 20th, high school course selection opened for the 8th graders. February was an exciting and busy month for the RAM students, and the President's Day weekend was well-deserved. Thank you.
Thank you. As far as the junior student representative report, the SAT is coming up soon on the March 4th, next week actually. Very important, very exciting. Been studying. A lot of people I know have been studying too.
Brianna, as always, can you speak up a little?
Sorry. SAT class has been paying off. Second, on the 14th, the NAHS had a event, charity event, I believe, or something with donating. It was just a little gathering at the Flower Girl, coloring and pottery included, and yeah.
Wish I had to say as much about the high school as the middle school. Thank you for your report. As we said, President's Day recess was really well deserved, really amazing. speaking back to the SAT, it actually just came from tutoring, so that was interesting. So they're really stressed, and I'm like, glad that's behind me. Looking to colleges now, but I was just like, just you wait, guys. It's just one piece of the puzzle. But they're like, oh, it's so stressful. I was just like, just you'll see. It gets worse. But we all
Sure, be nice.
yeah. If only I were a junior. But anyway, our second to last math team meet is next Thursday. I'm quite excited about that. It's this Thursday. My apologies. And then spring sports are going into action. People are having clubs and meetings and that kind of stuff. And everything's really getting kicked off. February at the high school was pretty mellow. Thank you.
Great, thank you, guys. Brings to the board chair report. I had the pleasure of speaking at early graduation this past week. So there were 4 students that graduated early. I thought it was a really pretty good crowd
It's great.
of folks. Drew was also there. It was just, I thought it was really, nicely done. There was refreshments. They had a lot of people celebrating them. I was pleased to have been a part of it. Also, cheer competition season is well underway. They have done well so far. They won this past weekend with the New England cheer competition. This weekend is states. I'm doing a lot of sitting on bleachers.
So a lot of people have mentioned some of the things that I was planning on talking about. The pep rally that happened at the middle school was great. The events that have been taking place for the 8th graders that are getting ready to transition to 9th grade. There's also a parent night for 8th grader parents who are going into 9th grade. Not only typically are 8th grade students a little nervous about the transition into high school, for those first time high school parents, that transition can be a little nerve wracking as well, as Ms. Romanchek might remember from last year. But the good thing that they have to look forward to is their senior year, where things are nice and relaxed, right, Oliver?
Yeah, definitely.
I just love the fact that a high school senior is being nostalgic back to middle school. Just wait until you're in your midlife. It gets exponentially worse when the first few steps that you take out of bed in the morning, you go, man, I wish I had my teenage knees again. It is not easy, I will tell you that. One of the things I wanted to just update, mention is our high school, our students who are not seniors are busy in the midst of choosing classes for next year. It's an exciting time. They're submitting all their information, their course requests. There's a lot of work that will need to be done once those course requests are finalized, and obviously your schedules are made, but it's a movement in the right direction. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that we are almost in March. And I'm excited about the warm weather, but it is really hard to imagine. And Oliver, as you get older, the years go by faster and faster. That's just another thing that you have to look forward to. I also wanted to share that there are a number of Ram High School student musicians who successfully auditioned for the Connecticut All-State Music Program and will participate as members of the All-State Honors Ensemble on March 27th and 28th at Wethersfield High School. Those students are Giovanni Asunto, Evelyn Gutierrez, Emerson Melquest, Jaslyn Pendleton, Lindsay Raymond, Mason Kompanick, Caitlin Hoban, and Maya Stock, and we certainly wish them well as they represent RAM in that program. And again, I'll just echo some of Heather's comments. The mid-year graduation is obviously much smaller and it's much less formal than our graduation ceremonies that we have in June. But I got to tell you, it's a great event. I think the intimacy of it is what makes it such a neat thing. You really you get to talk to the kids after they kind of go through the ceremony. Again, just a great experience. I do want to make sure I let people know that those students are absolutely invited, and we want them to partake in all of the senior activities that take place throughout the next few months, with dances and senior day, and obviously they are welcomed and encouraged to come back for the graduation that we have in June, and hopefully we'll set a date for later in our meeting. The last thing that I'll mention is at each board member's space, and I can make sure that I get them to board members who are attending remotely, is the latest edition of the Rambler, which is comes from our high school journalism team. It is done completely by students, and it's a great product. I love the fact, I've said this before, but I love the fact that we are still producing paper documents, right? Everything seems to have gone digitized, but I remember that being one of the first things that I was impressed about when I came here 3 years ago was, man, this is great. You get to physically interact with a magazine that our kids put together and put out. So read through that and enjoy. And the last thing that I'll mention as well, and it was mentioned over here, is the Unified Sports. It was a great event last week. It was Ram Middle School competing against Ram High School. So a great event. As the board knows, Unified is one of my favorite activities that I get to go to. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
So what I really like, if you look at the Rambler, there's a whole section on students, staff share basic car knowledge. And I can't tell you how many rental cars I've returned and not filled with gas because I can't figure out how to open the stupid gas can. Is it a button? Is it a push? But so I love that. That's great.
It's a great topic.
Okay, that brings us to the student program spotlight.
Yeah, so when we were putting the agenda together for this evening's meeting, I told Heather I have a unique student program spotlight. Typically, our student program spotlights highlights students or a student or programs that we offer at the school, whether it's courses, whether it's clubs, whether it's activities, whether it's sports, whether it's chorus or any other thing. This is a unique one in the sense of it really is a combination of work that was initiated by the adoption of the district's strategic plan, specifically related to the development of an instructional framework. Mary Rose Mead, who is our Director of Curriculum Instruction, has been working really hard this past for 6 months in facilitating the process of developing that strategic plan. And the reason I wanted to highlight it in this particular agenda item is because it really was a very collaborative effort that involved teachers in the district, it involved administrators in the district, it involved students as well. And our three student board representatives were actually involved in the development process. And so I wanted to provide an opportunity for Mary Rose and others who are part of the group. And we appreciate Eileen and Becky being here to be here and talk about their part in the process. But I'm going to turn it over to Mary Rose, and she's going to talk a little bit about the work that they have been doing.
There is a slides presentation which will pop up shortly. So yes, this was a highly collaborative, and you will see, I'm going to share with you not just the framework that we created, but the process so that you can get a sense of how many voices went into this, this document. So as soon as we get that up. Okay, is it going to go into like view mode or, yeah? I don't know if that's possible, but. Slideshow, yeah. There we go. If you go up to the top where it says slideshow, is that where, yeah, or slides or present, I think there's a present thing maybe. There we go. So the creation of the strategic, the instructional framework was a direct response to one of the asks from the strategic plan, which was to inspire relevant learning, including knowledge, skills, and dispositions that encompass our vision of a graduate by using an instructional framework inclusive of personalization and culturally responsive practices. So that was one of those goals on the strategic plan. And then there were action items, action steps. And the first two action steps are really what I'm going to focus on today. And that was to really do research, explore other frameworks, see what other districts were doing, and then to identify our instructional framework. So what is a framework? What's an instructional framework? Why is it important to have one? An instructional framework is just a set of expectations and effective practices And they're put into place to really ensure that all students are learning effectively and learning successfully. When we think about why we would have one, we use this analogy with our committee. If you're making a kitchen, if you're designing a kitchen, you don't just like put all of the appliances in all over the place. You want to make sure that your dishwasher is next to your sink, and that if you open your fridge, you have somewhere to put the food. There's design principles that you follow. Maybe you're into feng shui and you want there to be good flow. So you utilize what you know is a proven practice in order to ensure that you are doing an effective design that you can do your best cooking in. And so when you create an instructional framework, you want to be sure that you have structures in place and that you're following really strongly researched practices to ensure that students are going to be able to learn. There are other elements that are excellent byproducts of having something like this. One is that you ensure consistency in learning experiences. Having a framework can ensure effective teaching because there are set ideas or expectations that are out there, and then you can work to help professionally develop faculty to reach the asks of those expectations. Research has shown that having frameworks can improve student outcomes. It helps to align curriculum and goals, and it encourages accountability to make sure that everybody is working to their best effort in best practices for students. We had a very aggressive timeline for this. The research that we did as part of our committee work, some districts took like 2 years to do their framework, but we got right to it. Colin ensured that we had big blocks of time with some course release for faculty to come and work. So we, in October, November, we spent time exploring frameworks, drafting it by November, bringing the students in. December and January, we took our draft to other stakeholders beyond the committee so that we were bringing more eyes to the document, more input, and a lot of that was very affirming. And then we shared it with the faculty in January and February before bringing it to you. To give you an idea of the scope of people who were involved, that first everybody that you see in the top columns, those are all people that were part of the initial drafting of the document. And so you have in that far left column, you have the faculty. In the middle there, you have committee administrators. And if there were, of course, times an administrator would have to be called out to things, so they'd be popping in and out. And then we had this robust student input committee, 3 of our committee members here. And then we took all of that information and we brought it to alumni voices. We brought it to department coordinators who weren't a part of the original committee. We brought it to our entire school counseling staff, and also to the administrators that hadn't been on the original committee. And then we also had an outside consultant who was the former assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction in South Windsor. I also have a friend who was principal at RAM years and years ago, went on to many superintendent positions, and as a friend help, she took a look at it and also gave me some great feedback. So this is just a quick picture of after one of our work days and this was the day we had our students, so that was all together. So in terms of the process, our first workshop, Eileen's just gonna speak a little bit about what we did at our first workshop.
Okay, I was lucky to be involved. I think we took teachers from all different disciplines, and I represented CTE and in particular engineering. So I kind of tried to approach it with an engineering design concept, which the first part is the question, which she proposed to us right away. What does good teaching look like, and what does good learning look like? So we brainstormed that as an entire group. And from there, she narrowed down, we also researched as part of step 2 of the design process. We also researched what other DRGs, what other
Different districts,
did, both in Connecticut and outside of Connecticut. So we saw some graphics which were pretty cool, and some of them had 4 main themes, some had 5. So we took all that information, and Mary Rose honed in that we needed 4 or 5 different pillars. We started calling them pillars, which was interesting because framework is the design of where we want the pillars, where we want our school to be, Region 8. So we started talking about pillars, and we had to decide what our 4 or 5 pillars were. So we came up with classroom instruction was one, environment, both in the class and in the community, planning, which was our group that we had to come up with a design statement for. Assessment and curriculum.
Yes,
Okay.
which
I think
morphed.
equity came out.
Yeah,
once.
they all like things blended in.
So
Yeah.
things blended, but we decided to go with those 5. And so then we broke into smaller groups of three teachers, I guess. And we came up with our mission statement, our design for each of those 5 disciplines or pillars. And that was kind of fun because it ended up being quite the word salad to get
Yeah, it
as
was,
much information packed into maybe 2 sentences to describe what each of those pillars were.
yeah, it was
So there
intense.
was a lot of
Yeah.
editing and
Yeah.
crossing out, and we each had our paper on the wall. And,
Yeah.
And it was grueling, and that was our first.
That was our first.
That was our first.
It was about 4 hours. It was a lot, yeah,
Yeah.
but it was intense, but it was incredibly
And
productive.
interesting enough, those statements didn't really change.
Yeah, that
throughout
was,
the whole process.
yeah.
So there was a lot of thought put into
Yeah.
that.
So that was our first really long, grueling day. And then the next, we lost our slideshow. The next workshop day, the first half of that was, again, that big committee coming together prior to the students arriving. And Becky, you want to just talk a little bit about what we did that day? It's not.
So we had a good little brain break in between, which was good because it was a long first session. And so then in our individual committees, we went back to our posters where we outlined the title of our pillar and like our mission. And then as a group, in our individual groups, we outlined what do these expectations look like for the teachers and what do these expectations look like for the students? How can we make statements for both categories of learning and teaching? And so from that, we brainstormed for ourselves, but then afterwards we did kind of like a gallery walk style, and we went to everyone else's pillar and put sticky note comments on all of the different statements. Everyone could think of how these expectations look for teaching, how these expectations look for learning, and broke them down into subcomponents. So we really kind of extracted everything we could in like that pedagogical world for each of those ideas and those pillars. And then we went back to our original posters in our groups and looked at the feedback from all of the other groups, and then really started to pare down. We looked for commonalities in these expectations, common language, common vernacular, and then reinforced this with our mission statement for instructional framework, as well as making sure we're still kind of in that realm of our strategic plan, and really aligned all of those expectations for students and for learning. And then the next part after that was a real fun. We brought in
That was the great.
students.
It
That
was
my most favorite.
incredible. This was everybody's favorite part. So we had what happened at our first meeting, as I said, can you please suggest a student that you think would be good to give us input? And we had students grades 7 to 12, kids who take AP, kids who take, kids in the shop. Look, we tried to get every possible perspective that we could. And we had originally 25 and 21 were able to come to the workshop. So I brought them aside. I said, you guys, you're here, go for the jugular, right? So you guys want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Who wants to start with the middle school? Maybe?
So I know that I enjoyed the experience because I was really able to put an input and share my voice of how I want my learning to be and how, what I enjoy, what I don't, and then I know what I prefer in my learning and how my teachers teach me. And it was good because I was able to hear what other people's opinions were as well. And the teachers' point of views and just pretty much everything. It was a good experience, especially for the middle schoolers who have the next 4 years in Ram High School to continue to build on that.
I enjoyed my experience because obviously I had my perspective and I had all of my peers around me. They gave their perspective, and it was also very interesting to see how the teachers were actively trying to fix like the issues of like what they may have while they're teaching. Because like when you're a student and like teacher's not doing well for you, you're just like mad. So it was nice to see like, yeah, like I'm trying to, but so is the teacher. It was a very nice give and take relationship, or very, you know, like yeah.
I think it was really interesting to see, as you said, the teachers' perspectives on what kids were, are learning and how they are learning and what the best strategies are. Because it was, everybody has their own way of learning, what they think is the best way of learning. But I think these workshops were really nice because it made a general, idea of like, okay, we need to teach to kids who, some are very visual learners, but some, aren't visual learners at all, and just are reading, they can absorb the material. But how can we get all types of learners and support all these types of learners? I think that was like really evident in every single pillar, as you guys said. It was evident that you're trying to attach support to every type of student, regardless, even if they're an AP or somebody who's struggling a little bit more, that you were able to help them in that regard.
Can one of you just tell us what you actually did? Or did you sit around tables, or did you go around with sticky notes and put things everywhere? What was your-
If you can look on.
Yeah,
both
I'll
of
give
the-
you the, yeah, go ahead, you reference that.
If you look on both of the monitors, you'll see that each student, we were all brought into the conference room where the teachers had wrote down on these big posters what they thought that this instructional framework should look like, and each pillar was broken into like a different section of the room. And so we got and divided ourselves into, I think, 4 or 5 groups, and then went around at each in our groups, reflecting like how you guys did it with the teachers, and you did it at first, and then you all looked around, as you said, gallery style, and went that way. And we wrote any comments that we thought, both good and both bad. A lot of kids were like, I really like this idea and I really want to keep it. But some students were also like, this idea doesn't work. And, people were like, yeah, I agree with that. Like, this, might be a little too much, from the teachers' perspectives, but the students seem to give their perspectives and maybe alter a little bit to be more supportive, or this or that. And so in both of these studies, you can see Miss Vega Boulay and I know another RAM student was up there. We're giving all those sticky notes are from the students.
Yeah, the blue, I'll give you another slide. That all those blue, and they were actually, you guys had some other colors. You ran out of blue and started going to other colors too. So you can see how much input we had from the students.
Yeah, I think like all these students, but as you saw, see so many like sticky notes to all of them. And the ones, even with the ones that had more, it doesn't mean they were worse. Sometimes they were super supportive as well.
Yeah, a lot of affirmation, which was really nice.
And you might notice there's only 4 pillars now.
Yeah, so you'll see how that a lot of that came from the student
Right.
visit, because we had curriculum as a pillar. And then as the students were going, then they're going, well, this is all here, and this is here, and this is here. So you'll see where we landed, rethinking that. So this is where we landed after that workshop. And then Becky and I sat in my office and took every sticky note and created response comments. So we knew where that feedback was. And then that was the piece that we brought to the next group of stakeholders, to the school counseling office. One of my favorite parts of the whole I love being with the kids, but I was so affirmed. We brought all of your comments and the few teacher comments that were from that day into the school counselors, and they looked at them and said, this reflects what we hear from our students. So we knew that we had this wonderful group of students, but it really affirmed that they were very open about saying the things that they were looking for, the ways that they learn today, and what we need to think about when we develop our framework. And I think you guys will hear some things that you affirmed and even added in. So we did this process, we brought it around to another group of stakeholders, and then the draft came, we brought it to the teachers, and now you get to see it tonight. So after looking at many visuals, some that were impossible to follow, they were like hives and hunt, it was crazy, but this was the framework that visual that Eileen was talking about. And the very base of this is dedicated faculty engaged in continuous learning. we know that having a strong faculty is really at the base of what can happen in a school. And having this as a foundational element aligns with that strategic plan, action goal, identify RAM's instructional framework components, aligning them with educator evaluation criteria. That's now the new teacher evaluation system is directly linked to faculty goals, faculty growth, so that they can have a strong impact on student instruction. The next is rigorous and equitable curriculum. That's where curriculum landed. After we realized that it was just being repeated, it was just repeating everything in the other four. And then parent and community engagement, and so much research tells us how important that is. So those are those foundational pieces. And then our framework pillars: learning environment planning, instruction, and assessment. So I'm just going to share with all of you our we believe statement, our belief statements. These are the ones that Eileen said. We really crafted these that first 4-hour workshop. By the end, we had things that look very much like this. There was a little bit of wordsmithing at that second workshop, but by and large, we were able to write at these. So our learning environment statement: we believe if we foster a welcoming, collaborative, safe, and supportive student-centered learning environment, students will gain skills and dispositions necessary to engage successfully in school and beyond. Below that, we have statements of teacher expectations. We have statements of student expectations. I'm just going to read a few from the teachers and the students. Teachers communicate consistently with students as a class and as individuals, create structured systems that ensure student responsibility for learning, foster a learning environment in which students are encouraged to take risks and reflect on their learning, build a classroom and school community where students feel empowered to fully participate, make classrooms safe for questioning, model a growth mindset, etc. Students under this expectation: participate as active and welcoming member of the learning community, respect and encourage diverse perspectives, demonstrate a growth mindset, appropriately and respectfully collaborate with peers to deepen understanding. And I think you may be hearing some of our skills and dispositions are worked into this document as well. Under planning, we believe intentional, collaborative, and reflective planning, which incorporates established standards, high-yield instructional strategies, and authentic assessments, will result in engaging, rigorous, relevant, and culturally responsive learning experiences for our students. And for the teacher expectations, plan with intentionality to generate student curiosity and promote critical thinking, create lessons and activities with clear goals, directions, and outcomes, collaborate with course-like teachers to ensure consistently high expectations for all students, anticipate student challenges and associated interventions, make connections to previous learning and between important concepts within and across disciplines. This particular one we had in there, and our alumni that came back to give feedback put stars all over this one and talked about how important that is. Consider the essential why of a unit or lesson or learning activity. And then for students, become active participants in identifying learning strategies and processes that best aid their learning. Be aware and be able to articulate the purpose of their learning, articulate connections between learning within and across disciplines. So there's a lot of crossover between the expectation for the teacher and what we hope the student will be able to do as well. In instruction, we believe when teachers use innovative, research-based, and engaging instructional strategies, including supporting students' personalized learning objectives, all students will be actively engaged in their own learning process. Under this, something that came up from the students, and you guys, this will ring for you: teachers provide project-based learning and hands-on learning opportunities. That is one that the students had about 10 sticky notes on, and they kept writing there. That's so important to them. Encourage growth mindset through individualized feedback, articulate the why of learning, and you can probably hear some of these ideas as threads that run through. Utilize differentiation and multiple instructional strategies to meet learning styles. Consistently use data to form from multiple sources to drive whole class and individual instruction. Employ strategies and activities proven to engage students. use real world learning challenges, etc. That's the instruction list is really long there. Students reflect on their own learning and work towards a growth mindset, actively engage in productive, meaningful, and respectful discourse, engage in collaborative learning, interact with curriculum that includes different perspectives in addition to their own identities and their own communities. Self-assess and reflect on achievement in order to set ambitious but attainable goals, reach to meet high expectations. So those are just a few from each. And then the last is assessment. We believe assessment should be rigorous, varied, authentic, reflective of the learning experience, and ultimately be used to promote reflection and improve student outcomes, including the achievement of standards and the mastery of skills. And for this, teachers provide timely and actionable formative feedback that supports student progress towards deeper understanding and mastery, communicate clear expectations, and provide supports for student success, provide models that demonstrate levels of mastery, and provide rubrics to communicate expectations when appropriate, acknowledge student growth as well as student mastery. And then students are open to different assessment types and their purposes, perform a variety of assessments to show mastery of a skill or attainment of a standard, demonstrate resilience and engage in productive struggle, view assessments as opportunities for growth and part of the learning process, and apply teacher feedback for self-reflection and improvement. And those are a few of those expectation statements. So those are our 4 pillar statements. Where do we go next? Looking at our strategic plan, we've met those first 2 action items. The third is to provide professional development on the framework. We've already started that because we spent time with all of our faculty in department meetings over the last few months, sharing the framework, giving them an opportunity to ask questions. We'll continue to do that work, but we're going to continue to implement instructional practices that are consistent with the framework across the district, develop and revise curriculum aligned with our instructional framework, provide necessary resources and ongoing support for implementing the framework, and to review student achievement data and determine the effect of implementing the framework. One thing about the way that that's written in the strategic plan, we did notice as we were doing this work, so much of these really wonderful practices are happening here. So for most people, the framework helps to solidify and affirm some of the practices that we have while giving us a challenge to reach even further to enhance the learning and growth of our students. Does anybody have any questions?
That's great. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
How do you know if you're making progress in these goals? How do you?
Oh, that's a great question. We actually talked a little bit about this the other day. You know, we have all kinds of ways that we collect data, big data. So we have our PSAT series, we have SBAC testing from the state, we have the SAT. We talked a lot about looking at teacher-specific data when we look at student growth and progress by bringing some of these practices in. One thing that I've noticed this year because of the new teacher evaluation system, it is really about teachers setting goals and bringing in these types of practices more vigorously into their classes. And already I'm hearing teachers, and we're just past the mid-year point in our mid-year meetings, talking about the way that doing some of these work, trying to create some project. I had one particular teacher doing a lot of project-based learning and having the students look for different ways to show their understanding and mastery and talking about the way that that's invigorating instruction. So there will be lots of different ways that we can collect information about the impact of this.
The other thing, and Mary Rose and I have had a lot of conversations about this, is establishing a practice, and we're not quite sure of what moniker it's going to have or how we're going to, but it's basically learning walks. It's providing opportunities for staff to get out of their classrooms and spend time observing and seeing what other people are doing within the context of different classrooms. Like, the field of education is fantastic, but it also can be very isolating for teachers because they go into their classrooms, they theoretically or literally or figuratively shut their door and they do their thing. and they just keep doing their thing. And you go to professional development opportunities, which are where you learn things and you can implement new things. But one of the things that we know as educators is you can really learn a lot by spending time seeing what your colleagues and teammates are doing. And, again, we've discussed the idea of that as being one of the next steps as well, is looking at how they're called a variety of different things in a variety of different places.
Yeah.
In some places they're called instructional rounds, in some places they're called learning walks. There's degrees of formality with how they're conducted. But currently they're not being done here in the district.
We did, but several years ago, we had classroom visits where a teacher, I don't know if you may remember this, we would go. And so you would see one teacher in your discipline and one teacher in another discipline teaching. It's really wonderful because you also, some people would go where they knew a particular student was that they were struggling with, or, that they wanted to see, how does this teacher manage this person, or inspire, oh, he's doing great in math. Oh, what can I see that you do with this student that I could maybe do as well? So there's lots of ways to utilize that practice. And so learning walks or instructional rounds is one of them as well. So we're exploring that now.
And, it's important for people to know they're not evaluative observations, even though administration will absolutely be a part of that process. It's not evaluative. It's non-judgmental. It's, hey, we've talked about prioritizing these practices within the context of our district. Let's see how those are playing out. And I've been through that process in a variety of other districts, and it's a very effective one to get out and give people an opportunity to know, hey, listen, we're talking about it, but now we're seeing it in practice, and it's a really good thing.
Anybody else? Well, thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you to Mary Rose, the committee, Becky and Eileen. Thanks so much for being here. This is, as she said, this was a heavy lift, and a very heavy lift in a very short period of time. So great job.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda.
So there on the consent agenda, there's a number of different things. There's minutes from our regular board meeting, our special our special budget workshops. And then the other pieces on our consent agenda are the approval of policies after revisions or deletions. Just for people to know, I did not receive any feedback one way or the other about necessary changes or recommended changes to any of the policies, or concerns about deletions that we are recommending from the policy subcommittee. So my recommendation is to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Scott Soya, a second.
Second, Gabe Marks.
Gabe Marks. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay. New and unfinished business.
So I will turn it over to Eva, because our first thing is the audit.
All right, so Catherine Patnod, who is the managing partner for our audit through PKF O'Connor Davies, is online, and she's going to walk us through our most recent audit, of which everyone should have their audit books in front of them, outside of, well, Gabe has his and who brought his. The other folks who are not in, I will bring them to the next board meeting so that everyone has their audit books. So Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Erin's pulling up your presentation, just so you know.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
All right, thanks. So as Eva said, I'm a partner with PKF O'Connor Davies and the partner in charge of your audit. So I just wanted to go through some of the highlights of the annual financial report, the highlights of the single audit, some required communications with the board, as well as some future considerations based on new GASB standards that were released. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll go to slide 4. And we'll talk about some financial statement highlights. There was an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is a clean opinion, so what you're looking for. The management's discussion and analysis, or MD&A, is a good executive summary of the fiscal year operations. This gives some highlights, such as governmental funds had a total ending fund balance of $1,178,000. This was a total increase of $857,000 from the prior year. You had capital asset additions of $1.1 million. This included repair of the athletic fields, cafeteria equipment, and computers. And your long-term debt decreased by $1,023,000, primarily due to principal payments. On the next slide, we'll look at some more detail of the governmental funds, which can be found on Exhibits C, D, and E in the financial statements. The general fund had a fund balance at year end of $3,088,000, which was an increase of $773,000 from last year, which we'll talk about shortly when we look at the budgetary highlights. The capital improvement fund had a fund balance of $65,000 at year end, which was a decrease of $195,000, and the capital non-recurring fund had a fund balance of $1,152,000 at year end, which was a decrease of $89,000. Both of these was primarily the difference in timing of capital expenditures versus the member town assessments received and transfers in. And then your other governmental funds, which include the grants fund, school lunch, and school activity funds. These had an ending fund balance of $872,000, which was an increase of $368,000. The majority of this was in the grants fund due to $391,000 for the school air quality improvement grant that was expended in prior years but received this year. On the next slide, we'll look at some of the budgetary highlights. Your budgetary schedules can be found on RSI 1 in the audit. Your total revenues were below budget by $188,000, primarily the excess cost grant, which was $232,000 for budget, as the related expenditures were lower than expected. So you received less. You also had an appropriation of fund balance of $609,000. This was from the fiscal 23 surplus and was transferred out to the capital non-recurring fund. Your total expenditures were below budget by $1,572,000, primarily due to central services being below budget by $912,000 due to personnel savings, and transportation was below budget by $231,000, primarily due to IEP changes, bus not in service. This left with a fiscal 24 budget surplus of $1,383,000. So that's the total revenues less your total expenditures, since the transfer out was from the prior year budget surplus. So I know Eva probably presented to you the 2% that can be transferred to the CNR fund, the capital non-recurring fund, which is $625,598. So next, we'll talk briefly about the single audit. You were not required to have a federal single audit this year, as your total expenditures were below the $750,000 threshold. But you did have a state single audit where we tested the HVAC indoor air quality program, and we had no findings or questions on that. Some required communications. You should have also received a letter to those charged with governance. This talks about our responsibility, which is to form and express an opinion about whether the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. It also mentions significant estimates, which includes the OPEB liability, the other post-employment benefits. The disclosures in the footnotes are neutral, consistent, and clear. There were no uncorrected misstatements and no material corrected misstatements. We've requested and received management representation letters, and we are independent. And I think last year you may have had one recommendation from the audit. This year we had none. So future considerations, these are just related to new GASB standards that came out. So nothing you've done wrong, just new things that will be effective. So GASB 101 will be effective for your fiscal 25 audit. This one relates to compensated absences, which is a liability that can be found in the government-wide financial statements on Exhibit A. This new standard requires that liabilities for compensated absences be recognized for leave that has not been used and for leave that has been used but not yet paid in cash or settled through non-cash means. We did have a presentation on this a couple months ago that went out to all our clients. I know I've spoken with Eva about the things the district will need to do to be prepared for this. So really, it's just a little bit more work on the finance department's part to get some more information for the audit. And when you see your financial statements next year, most likely the compensated absences liability will have increased due to this new standard. The next one that's effective for fiscal 25 is GASB 102 on certain risk disclosures. This just provides guidance on when you might need to disclose risk related to certain concentrations or constraints. I'm not anticipating this will have any effect on your financial statements, but you'll just need to take a look and see if anything that could cause a substantial impact has happened and would need to be disclosed. And then the last standard is effective for fiscal year 26. These are financial reporting model improvements. This clarifies and updates guidance for preparing the MD&A. This will just improve the quality of the analysis of the changes from the prior year. You don't have any proprietary funds, so that won't affect you. And the other item is the budgetary comparison information. Right now, the comparison data is in the MD&A. This new standard will require those variances to be explained in the notes to RSI. So it'll just be in a different place. So those are the highlights of the audit, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have one. So I'm looking at the summary statement of net position, which is on page 7, and I'm not used to this government accounting, so you'll have to bear with me. But I'd like to get my head around the unrestricted net position, the negative 3.5 million. I recognize it's a balancing number relative to the net investment in capital assets and restricted funds, balancing to the total net position. But how common is it for it to be negative, and as negative as, say, roughly 10% or so of the total position?
I've definitely seen this be negative, most commonly in my towns and districts that have an OPEB liability and don't have a trust for OPEB. Just because that liability is so high, it tends to make net position negative. But the liability for your OPEB is related to health insurance, because your retirees can stay on the health insurance even if they have to pay 100% of the cost. There's still a liability that has to be recorded on the books. So that's kind of why the unrestricted net position ends up negative. So I'd say it's pretty common, and it's not really something to be concerned about.
And you are, just to make sure I heard it right, it's the OPEB that's driving that in a lot of cases.
Generally, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay.
Great, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Kath.
much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right. Oh, we have to accept, sorry about that. Do we have a motion to accept the Region 8 Board of Education 2023-2024 budget audit?
So moved.
Mr. Golphin, a second.
I'll second Gabe Marks.
Gabe Marks. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain?
I'm going to abstain. I just haven't had time to read enough to. Answer.
Okay. Oh, are you doing votes too?
No, Dawn's there.
Oh.
I do notes.
Okay.
Because I do notes.
All right.
Before we move on from this, can I just ask is if we have questions, just direct them to you?
Yeah, okay, then we'll get you answers.
Yeah, I haven't had time to read this thing here.
A lot.
All right. That brings us to 10.3, discussion of possible action related to the 2025-2026 Region 8 Public Schools proposed administrative budget.
10.2.
Yeah, 10.2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip it?
So, yeah, I could give a quick context. I apologize. So in your board packet is an enclosure 10.2. It's a memo from Eva to me. So by accepting the audit, there's a process that we have to go through in order to allocate 2% of last year's total budget into our account, which our reserve account for educational expenditures, which is that new account that Eva set up. And so there is a recommended motion. So basically by making the motion to allocate the money into the reserve expenditure, the reserve for educational expenditures, it will enable us to utilize those funds to help offset the track project that we've been discussing. This has been the plan all along, to use the capital non-recurring fund, to use the capital unallocated fund, and then obviously add this $625,599 to this account, which will help reduce the amount of money that we actually have to, we're going to apply those funds to the track project that we're trying to accomplish. It will leave a balance of the $525,487 that still needs to be funded. That money will remain in the capital plan, the capital budget for next year as well. But the motion that is in your board notes will allow us to take the 2% and then allocate it to that reserve for educational expenditure account.
Didn't we already do this? I feel like we did.
So what you have to do is you accept the audit first, and then once the audit's been accepted, then we have to allocate the money through a motion into that account.
Okay, so the recommended motion is to allocate the fiscal year 2023-2024 audited surplus amount allowable as per state statute of 2% of total budget totaling $625,599 to the reserves for the education expenditure fund for projects to be determined at a later date.
So moved.
Gabe Marks.
I'll second.
Second is Amy Romanchuk. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone abstain?
I'm abstaining.
Scott is going to abstain. Okay, now that brings us to 10.3.
So we wanted to provide the total board, the whole board, with an update on kind of where we are with the budget process. This is information that we shared, that Eva and I met with the Finance Subcommittee on February 11th and shared this information with the Finance Subcommittee at the time. The administration, in an effort to reduce our budget increase that we would have for next year, we're currently at a 4.36, and we're working to obviously reduce that increase to the extent that we're able to do so. And one of the ways that we are looking to do that and recommending that being done is to reduce the budget through the strategic use of current fiscal year funds to purchase items and equipment that are currently in next year's budget. This has been something that we've historically done in the district. When we're fortunate enough to have a strong financial position, and we currently do have one. Just for context, I should have said this, there is an enclosure 10.3 in your board packet that provides some details about this. So in total, the recommended items or equipment adds up to $443,414 and includes the majority of the current capital budget items and a number of items from the operating budget as well. And I can quickly go through. So from the capital budget, it would essentially remove all items from the capital budget with the exception of two things. the track, the amount of money that's been budgeted for the track, which is that $525,47. And then the other one is $40,000 for the sidewalk repairs. And the reason that we are leaving that $40,000 price tag in the sidewalk, of the sidewalk repairs in the capital budget is because the monies that we're using are really meant to be for one-time expenses, and that $40,000 is really an ongoing expense. We've been budgeting that amount for a significant number of years because we continue to just chip away at the sidewalk, no pun intended. So that's the reason that is remaining in the capital budget for next year. So again, in totality, it would be the stair treads, the balance of the exterior window flashing, the student desks and chairs for the high school, the Ford F-150 replacement truck, the equipment lift for the grounds equipment, and the Kubota tractor as well. Also, there are items that fall into that one-time purchase category from the operating budget. And you heard about some of these items when our department coordinators gave their presentations. And there's a list again, and that's on the back page of that 10.3. There are things like science tables, replacements for classrooms, art tables, a pole vault mat, a digital simulator for our EMT program, the virtual welders, teachers' chairs, a high jump mat, vacuum, stock tickers, manufacturing equipment. Again, the list is on the paper in front of you. In total, those single one-time purchases come out to $160,624. And again, that would allow us, if those two things combined, would add up to $443,414, which could be taken out of then and reduced from next year's 25-26 budget from capital and operating, which obviously would have a significantly positive impact on where our increase would be. Any questions about that before I move on? In order for us to do this, I should say this, in order for us to do this, there is a recommended motion in the board notes because transfers would need to be made in order for us to make these one-time purchases. So there's, and actually it's written as, it actually needs to be two separate motions, just so you know. So it's recommended motion one would have to be voted upon and then recommended motion two.
So the first motion is to transfer $282,790 to reduce the proposed capital improvement budget for fiscal year 2025-2026 as presented on page 1 in enclosure 10.3 to fund the costs of identified one-time purchases. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Scott Soyette, a second.
Second.
Drew Goffin. Any other discussion on that list? Pam?
I just have a question. I may have missed this. So this is to reduce our budget. You said 4.36. What is it? What would it be? What would we be presenting?
Well, so this isn't the only reduction. Could we go through all of them, Pam? Sure. And then I can kind of tell you where I feel like we're going to land pretty close to.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, so the next motion is to transfer $160,624 to reduce the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2025 to 2026 as presented on page 2 in enclosure 10.3 to fund the costs of identified one-time purchases. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Gabe Marks, a second.
A second.
Amy Romanchuk. Any other discussion on that list? Okay. Oh, Scott, were you going to say something? Oh. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay.
So I'll just continue on and talk about some of the dynamics that have changed with regards to the budget since the last time we met. Another factor that would help, that's going to reduce our current budget proposal of that 436, Pam, that you were asking about, is the notification of a retirement of a high school math teacher that was provided after the budget had initially been presented and after our budget workshops. It was collaboratively determined between the administration and the math department head that the high school would have adequate staffing in the department to meet student needs without having to replace the teacher. As the board knows, this is the process that we've used every time we have a resignation or retirement. We look at whether or not those positions need to be filled. In some cases, they do, and in some cases, they don't. In this case, it appears that our staffing levels will be adequate without having to replace that teacher. I do, and so that would be, we are going to reduce the budget by approximately $130,000. That's the total for salary and benefits for that one position. The one thing that I always want to make sure that I state to the board is we have been going through the process of reducing and eliminating positions. As we see enrollment tick back up again, just remember that I might have to come back to you all and say, hey, remember we got rid of that math teacher? Well, now we need to put a math teacher back in, because between the combination of the Columbia students and then our just projected enrollment increases, I do anticipate that conversation happening. I don't have a crystal ball to say when, but I think that it will happen, sometime in the foreseeable future. Any questions about the elimination of that position?
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
It really doesn't have to do with the elimination. Is there a policy as to when retirements need to be handed in by?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
No, that's actually not in the contract. It was
Not in
something
the
that I was trying to achieve in this latest contract negotiation, but it wasn't something that we could get in.
Oh.
It is definitely beneficial. I'm sure that because it helps us
It does help.
develop the budget. But no, unfortunately, there's not. So there could be other ones. I will tell you that as it stands right now, the administration has not informed me of any more anticipated retirements. Certainly, an unexpected resignation could come along. If that happens, we'll go through that exact same process of looking at staffing and the needs. And before I get to your number that you're looking for, Pam, there are a few other things that we are waiting to be finalized before setting the actual percentage increase of where we're going to be. As the board knows, we are still waiting for our insurance premium cost, increase to be determined. That is not done in isolation by Eva or I. That is a part of an insurance consortium. At our last meeting that we had in February, the decision was to maintain where we currently are budgeted at an 8% increase. That could change. We're scheduled to meet sometime in around the third week of March. We'll set it at that point, and we're going to bring that revised information, if there is any, to the board at that point. And then the last piece of that's really going to have a potential substantive impact is the number of ninth grade students from Columbia that decide to enroll in the high school for us for next year. Our current budget projection, our current budget for anticipated revenue has actually 11 students from Columbia. It was the 10 that we're anticipating to come from 8th grade into 9th grade. There's actually a student, we actually have a Columbia student currently attending this year on a tuition basis now. And that student was a RAM student. There was a change in residency, and I made the decision. I didn't want to upset the continuity of the student's education. So I said, we have this partnership set up. Let's just get it going this year. And it worked out well for us. And then we also actually currently have a student from another school district who is tuitioning in. That's an agreement that we came to with that other school district. So those tuition dollars are factored in as anticipated revenue, plus the 10 that we initially anticipated. I will tell you right now, the number that I'm hearing from Columbia, although it is not set in stone, is actually 12 students have indicated a desire to come to RAM. That number is going to be firmed up in, I think, that first week of March. And so when I come to the board for our March meeting, we're going to have a better sense of what our anticipated revenue will be, at least from a base tuition perspective. There is obviously some additional tuition revenue that we could get if any of those students are receiving any specialized services. That money would be on top of the base. To answer your question, Pam, I can't give you this. I don't want to give you a hard and fast number, so I want to make sure it's abundantly clear. This isn't exactly where we're going to land, but I anticipate at this point, based off of the information that Eva has been able to give to me, that we're going to land somewhere around 2.5, somewhere in that neighborhood. Again, I'll have a better sense of that at our March meeting.
So you mentioned we have another student from another non-Columbia school.
Correct.
How does that work normally?
It's not an uncommon thing for school districts to, and I want to make sure that I am very conscientious about educational privacy rights when I say
Right,
this.
yeah.
So I'm going to talk in general terms.
Yeah.
It is not an uncommon scenario in any way, shape, or form for a superintendent to reach out to another superintendent in a neighboring or close by district to say, would you be able to take in a tuition student for whatever the circumstances are? You have a lot of dialogue about the needs and you want to make sure that you can meet the needs of that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are often times where we can agree to do it. There are times where we will reach out to other school districts and have that similar conversation. And again, it's a litany of reasons why that type of an agreement would happen, but it is not an uncommon thing.
And the tuition
We
calculation?
we adhere to the district policy that is about out-of-district students. It is outside of the partnership that we have with Columbia.
Right.
So the tuition rates that we have with Columbia do not apply in those situations.
So how do tuition rates?
There's a policy that identifies what the rate is. It basically is commensurate with what the per pupil expenditure is from the previous school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just interested. Yeah, makes sense.
Just before we get off this, I wanted to comment that report, the 10.3 there, the transfers is very much like what I was talking about last
That
month.
doesn't come from the system.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is that was all a manual thing?
Yep.
Yeah. That's too bad because that was a very readable report.
A lot of work.
All right, this brings us to enclosure 10.4, discussion around the 2025 graduation.
Yeah, so in your board packet, as Heather alluded to, 10.4 provides my recommendation for a June 13th, 2025 to be established as the Ram High School graduation date, Friday the 13th, just in case everybody wants to, some little uneasiness about that, but I think everything's going to be just fine, knock on wood. The board must take action to establish a high school graduation date, and there is a recommended motion in your board notes.
So the motion is to approve the 2025 Ram High School graduation date of June 13th, 2025.
So moved.
Gabe Marks, a second.
I'll second.
Scott Soyette. Any discussion about the date? I have a question.
Sure.
If there's a snow day, what happens to the date?
We hold the day.
Okay.
Yep. We're hoping, obviously that's not the case. I am sick of getting up at 4:30 in the morning and being on the phone for 45 minutes, but yes, we hold the date of the 13th.
Killjoy. Everybody likes a snow day.
It's not so fun when you're in my state. I'll tell you that. It is not.
I'm sorry, I just got to tell a quick story. My father-in-law was a superintendent of schools. And they graduated, and my wife graduated from the high school there. They had a little bit in their yearbook. I want to donate, I want to pass on something to so and so and so and so. And there was one entry that said, snowblower to the next year's class, not snowblower, snowmaking machines, the next year's class, used only once on Dr. Yetman's front yard.
Oh, that's good. It wouldn't be that easy anymore. We have meteorologists that we work with and we get reports from. We have 4:45 a.m. conference calls with other superintendents.
Well, he had those too, but it was not as many factors besides looking out the window.
Right.
Not in 1984.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? All right, that brings us to the personnel report.
So one retirement, which I just alluded to, Patty Dorman, high school math teacher for the district, is going to retire effective June 30th, 2025. She has been employed by the district since August 25th, 2011, and we wish her the best in retirement.
Yeah. Retirement's great.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Okay. And then first read of policies.
Yeah, so I sent a late email to board members. So board members that are online, you would have gotten this, but I will just note that the first policy that is coming to a first read is the code of conduct for board members. Mistakenly, a clean copy of the policy, which means it wasn't a red line version, so board members couldn't note what changes were actually put into the policy. So we will get that fixed, but I wanted to provide a hard copy to board members, and it was emailed to board members who are participating at home. The policy is largely unchanged from the previous policy. The only update that was made is being recommended by our legal counsel, Shipman and Goodwin, and that is simply the procedures for censure or other disciplinary actions. Now, obviously, this is something that we don't anticipate putting into place, but considering the fact that our legal team would be the ones working with the board in any scenario where censure or other disciplinary action would need to be taken against a member of the Board of Education, I felt that it was prudent that we modify our policy to align with their recommended process and procedures. I could certainly try to take any questions if people have any about that recommended policy change. Not hearing any, I'll just move on. The remaining policies are simply deletions, and I'll quickly give a context as to why we're recommending deletions of the following policies. The next one is policy 1413, use of school equipment or property. Essentially, what this policy provides is allowances for groups to borrow equipment or materials from the district should the need arise. It does say the school principal or his or her designee shall be empowered to act within this policy on request for borrowing school equipment. I personally don't think that this is a good policy to have in place. The towns of Hebron, Andover, and Marlborough have created budgets. They have provided, which provides us funding to pay for items. And we wouldn't, I can tell you that in my time here, we have not loaned out equipment. And I just think that, this is a policy that I could say Eva is not happy about and comfortable with. I can tell you that Michael Schleihofer, our director of facilities, is not comfortable with, and we're recommending that this policy be deleted. Any questions about this particular policy?
This was discussed in the policy committee, and it's interesting things about, if AHM came and said they wanted, 200 chairs for a meeting or something, we'd probably do it.
Yes, we would.
I'm just wondering what that means in terms of policy. If we say, we don't have a policy that allows that or controls it, so do we just assume that, it's all good faith?
So what I would say is, generally speaking, you can't have a policy that dictates everything. But to your point, AHM is a significant partner with the district. If I went to Tressa Giordano, the executive director of AHM, and said, hey, Tressa, I need a space to have an event, she would open her doors to the district and say, have the space. If in situations where we've needed staff, Tressa, but this is, I would see what you're describing as the 200 chairs be very limited to a group like an AHM, or potentially, again, Andover Public Schools, if they reached out to us and said, hey, listen, we need folding chairs. Is that a type of thing that I think we would be willing to do? Yes, but I don't think that not having a policy specifically about that is going to prevent us from doing that, nor do I think it's going to cause significant problems if an outside agency or organization comes to us and says, could we borrow 200 chairs? I'd say I can't lend you out chairs because we don't have that partnership established. For lack of a better term, I think that there are going to be times where you just have to use judgment and common sense. And to me, that happens a lot because policy doesn't cover everything.
You can't cover everything.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions? The next one is policy 1445. This is gifts to school personnel. This is another one that was discussed at the policy committee as well. By eliminating this policy, we are not saying, hey, it's a free for all. If you want to give your teacher $500, give your teacher $500. But I will remind the board that I think it was last spring, we adopted a code of ethics policy for teachers and staff. And within the context of that policy, there is language about accepting gifts and appropriateness, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bit of redundancy with regards to this policy. And my recommendation was to eliminate it. Any questions about that one? So the next one is policy 6145.1. And in the agenda, it says eligibility for participation in RAM middle school co-curricular sports activities. I want to make sure that I point out 6145.1, it's a weird policy in the sense that it has a middle school implication, but there's also a high school policy as well. So it basically is the same language for both the middle school and the high school. However, so we're looking at eliminating this policy for both the middle school and the high school. The reason that we can eliminate it is this board revised policy 5132.A, which is eligibility for participation in co-curricular activities. And so it's in a different section, but it covers the exact same thing for both middle school and high school. And it spells out eligibility for participation for both middle school and high school athletes. So again, we can delete this one because it is repetitive. Any questions about this? So the next one is 5132, student organizations and activities. This is a two-sentence unnecessary policy that just simply says all student organization meetings must be, and use of school facilities must be established through the principal's office. That is something that is required anyways. And then all fundraising activities must be approved in advance by the school principal. And we have a separate fundraising policy as a standalone. So again, this is an unnecessary policy and is just redundant. The last one, I believe, the last one that we have is policy it's board bylaw 9235, duties of the board clerk. This is outdated. It talks about, the duties and responsibilities of the board clerk, and essentially it is unnecessary for have this policy. And again, what we've been working to do is weed out unnecessary ones. So this is a policy that we're recommending be eliminated, and it really has no impact. We still have Dawn, who is serving in the capacity as the board clerk. So I can take any questions on that if people have any. Not hearing any of these policies, unless there's comments or concerns brought to my attention, will come to a second read at the March meeting. At this point, I can turn it over to Eva for financials.
All right. So in your packet, 10.7A is the statement of net favorable position at the end of January 31st, 2025, anticipating $1,083,605. The majority of the proposed net projection is associated with salaries, employee benefits, tuition for magnet and agri-science, as well as student placements. Please note that since you guys just voted on that, that'll be reduced next month. The revenue for excess costs, we should be receiving it this week. And again, the state is only funding us about 62.1% at this time, even though that we were put into tiers and we're supposed to receive 70%. The ADA baseball project, we posted the bid documents this past Friday, so we went live. So we're hoping to get interested parties who might want to come work and do the ADA project. The material containment is still at planning and zoning, and we keep following up, and hopefully we will move forward on that sometime soon. And again, just a reminder in the March meeting, you will not see capital non-recurring fund on the reports. It'll be the new education reserve fund that you will see. Are there any questions that the board may have at this time?
So what's the material? We got a bunch of stuff somewhere?
We got sand and stone and other.
And what's the project around it?
Giving us permission to put it where we'd like to place it.
Oh, and you need it from the town.
Mm-hmm.
So
even though would it not be on our property?
Mm-hmm.
But you still need approval?
Well, because we're building I think it was 2 years ago.
Yep.
2 years ago, the board approved as a part of, I think, was it a capital or was it?
Capital.
It was a capital project to build a containment center, like, kind of like what you might see at a landscaping place where mulch is separated out.
Yeah.
You would think it wouldn't be that complicated.
Right.
2 years later, we're finding out that it's, in some people's eyes, complicated. And so we are continuing to wait for approval from the Planning and Zoning, from Hebron Planning and Zoning Committee to approve the containment system that we want.
And do they tell you why they're sitting on their hands?
they're overwhelmed at the moment.
For
So-
2 years, they're overwhelmed?
Yeah.
So we're,
Sorry, that was snarky. wasn't it?
we're cautiously optimistic that this is a project that will
okay.
hopefully be able to move forward, because right now, well, are the materials still down there where they were?
So the materials are behind the bleachers and they
Yeah.
keep running away.
So
So
that
they're-
solves the problem, right?
They're-
I mean,
Well, I mean, first and foremost, they're unsightly.
That's why that's like that.
It's like there's big mounds in between the baseball field and the competition field. There's big mounds of sand, stone, and that we want to take those materials because it's just unsightly and it's not a good place to put it and move it up near the facilities garage. And we're just waiting. So
Well, and it's always, you've got kids that are climbing on them during games and things like that, which,
And that's a safety issue.
right.
Yeah.
Who the heck's on the planning and zoning?
anybody has any?
some of the Hebron members of the board might do.
No.
Just saying.
I just keep reading the River East about the plans and the dump and even just water tables here and there and just, it goes on and on and on.
Right.
So we're hoping. So anyways,
Fingers
I
crossed.
interrupted you.
No worries. Are there any-
Are they giving us any specific things to look at, or are they just slow?
So what transpired since we went out to complete the containment? We now have a sidewalk. The sidewalk isn't pitched correctly, unfortunately. So there's a drainage issue. And because of this drainage issue now, where we want to put the material containment center is no longer advisable because they're afraid of having the stuff washed away and adding to the drainage issue. So it's become a very big to-do.
We could all go make public comment at one of their meetings.
So that's where it is at the moment. So we had a site study completed, and that's what we keep following up and waiting for to see if we've had any movement. And unfortunately, December 9th was the last time we reached out and there was still no movement. So that's what it is.
It's ridiculous. Okay.
All right. The food service is enclosure 10.7B. As of the end of January, there is a net loss of $61,938.18 for the year. We have a new food service manager, Kathy Ann Torreno. She started in mid-January, and we are hopeful that Kat will be able to put us back on track where we are going to be riding back in the black as opposed to in the red. Are there any questions that the board may have at this time? Right, so hearing none, 10.7C is the RAM High School Middle School Student Activity Report. Again, we balance with the bank, which is always a good thing. Are there any questions that the board may have on that? Okay, hearing none. 10.7D is the short-term investment fund. We are still doing well. As of January 31st, 2025, we reinvested $1,984.19. Does the board have any questions?
The 150,000 that we moved over, where did it come from? What was it before? I forgot.
It was just in our regular bank account, and
Oh.
we put it over to the.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just couldn't remember. I was looking at it and went, where did it come from? Okay, yep, sorry.
You got off easy today.
I did. Thank you very much.
It's a win if I only get 4 comments from you, Scott. I gotta tell you, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. I was like, I won.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that
I think
brings.
the gauntlet was thrown down.
Do you want to ask another question? That brings us to committee reports, facilities, safety, transportation. Gabe, I think you're it.
February 11th, we discussed the generator project and recommended improvements to the exterior camera coverage. Next meeting is March 11th.
Finance, audit, compliance, and insurance.
We discussed the what we actually voted on today. So it's me who walked through to see what the buffer would be, what future expenses are, and how it actually lined up against the surplus that we're currently running. It all made good sense for us, so.
Okay. Policy?
You see what's going
We
on.
covered it.
You get to see it every month, so
You
there's
guys are
not too many
making
surprises there.
great progress, though.
That's so good.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is that we're getting close to the end of that review, aren't we?
We're getting close. Getting close.
That's great. Program and communication?
We have not had a reason to meet.
Okay. And Carrie's not here. Brings us to the informational.
Yeah, so kind of to Oliver's point about the stress of that he's feeling. As much as I'm excited about the warm weather coming up in the springtime, the downside of warm weather means the start of student assessment period, windows of time. So you have Smarter Balanced assessments coming up for middle school students. You have NGSS assessments coming up for high school students. You have NWA testing. NWA is it's a standardized assessment, but it's actually not one that is reported to the state. It's something that we utilize to help make well-informed decisions about instructional practices and needs of students. We're fortunate that our sending towns of Hebron, Andover, and Marlboro provide those assessments to rising seventh graders. So when kids are coming up from sixth grade to seventh grade, we'll have that information on them as well. The thing that I just want to make sure I point out as far as upcoming events to the board is we do have our upcoming drama production of Matilda. And that actually is inclusive of high school and middle school students. That is going to be the 13th, 14th, and 15th of March. I will send out a reminder to board members about that as well. It's always a great show, and I'm excited to see the play this year. Let me just roll right in the, the discipline report is there. If people have any questions, I can certainly do my best to answer them or provide information at a later date.
Anybody have any questions or comments about those? Okay. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Gabe Marks, a second.
Second.
Mike Bollier. Any discussion on adjourning? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.